everyone, welcome back, and today we are going to be talking about
problematic shipping,
a topic I did not think I was still going to be discussing in my late 20s. First of all, let me say thank you to everyone who has been tuning in, to all of my patrons. Your support helps keep me motivated, helps me keeping out all of this content. Patrons get the videos a few days earlier, and so if you are interested and want to support my channel, my Patreon account is available. However, just liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting all helps, keep these videos going and keeps all of this stuff, going. So I just appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch my videos, to comment, to share, to interact. Whether you agree or disagree, I do deeply appreciate it. One of the interesting things about having had a channel for as long as I have and having a platform for as long as I have is that I am able to go back literally in time and see what I thought about things when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. And while I will say overall, I think I was pretty good, there was often a lack of nuance about talking about certain issues that came from the place that I was in my life. I personally was not in a serious relationship until I was 20 when I dated my first girlfriend. So there is just not, I didn't really have a lot of experience about what it meant to be in a relationship, but I remember being very on guard and very about problematic relationships. And this was partly me growing up in the heyday of what I like to call the problematic YA romance, where a lot of stuff inspired by Twilight would have these relationships between young women and a supernatural person who was, for lack of a better word, a dick to them. And I was just very much like, this is a bad thing to put towards young girls. It's problematic. You're portraying it as true love. It is bad. And while I was absolutely right in most cases about that possibility, what I do think I did miss out when talking about Nuance is how we as shippers are sometimes shipping things for deeper reasons than true love. I think sometimes, especially as someone who ships problematic things a lot, like myself, a lot of us are dealing with our kinks in fandom, dealing with some kind of taboo things in fandom. Some of us are working out some sexual trauma through fan fiction, and I think that sometimes in trying to deal with these broader issues of art, rather than dealing with the way that media as a whole talks about consent and love and romance and sex, we sometimes put a lot of things onto shows. And with Raylo now being back into the discourse, I kind of felt inspired to talk about this again. But I will say the main reason why I started thinking about this subject is because of a current problematic ship that I am enjoying. So it's Hordak and Entrapdak's hair. I love that ship. But when I was on the Tumblr and I was going through everything, one of the big pieces of discourse I saw about Entrapdak was, he's a colonizer and therefore he shouldn't be with Entrapda. It's problematic. Why are people shipping an imperialist with this woman? Blah, blah, blah. And I just found it to be very interesting. And I said this in a Patreon video I did. One more reason to subscribe. When talking about Hordak and his relationship to Entrapda, that there is this ease of calling him a colonizer, which he absolutely is. He's an imperialist and a colonizer. However, at the same time, these same people choose to erase Entrapda's complicit behavior within working for the Horde in She-Ra. This is the same thing that they kind of erased, that Adora sort of like didn't realize she was being an imperialist, Catcher is an imperialist, Scorpia is an imperialist. We're dealing with a show that has a lot of these topics as the subtext of the show. And because it's a show for younger audiences, for I would say kids and teenagers, even though adults love it, because it's a great friggin' show, that we are taking these messages about colonization and stripping it of all of the nuance and just using it as a way of talking about a ship that we do not like. Growing up, I was growing up in shipping. My first major fandom was Avatar: The Last Airbender. As y'all know, Zutara gang all day, gang gang. I still ship Zutara. I love Zutara. I still think that it would have been better anyway, because the fic was so spicy, y'all. It was delicious. I remember I would make comments about that Aang and Katara creeped me out. And I even remember when I was watching Young Justice, I made these comments about Megan, who I did not like, still don't really like. I don't really like Young Justice, those first 2 seasons that came out. And I was very lax with calling those relationships pedophilic, which they are not, to sort of want to stigmatize people who liked it, of saying, well, if you like this, then you must be, you know, okay with 12-year-old boys having intimate relationships with 14-year-old girls. And it was just my way of wanting to say my thing is better than your thing. Or if you like this thing, you must be complicit about this issue. And those are just very puritanical and unfair ways of judging a couple that is A, fictional, and B, at the same time that I was not okay with that, I was okay with 14-year-old Katara and 16-year-old Zuko because I was 15, and that sandwich was a sandwich that I wanted to be a part in. My bisexual ass wanted to be in between Katara and Zuko. I did not want to be between Katara and Aang. Therefore, I wasn't interested in Canon. I was like, leave it. You know, he can go be with Toph, because they both 12, and that's for the children. Instead of just saying that or having the language to express that, I instead chose to project extra labels of real life toxicity onto a fictional couple. Mind you, it is okay to critique a ship and to recognize when it is being problematic, when the writing is not good, when it is when there are issues of consent, and to even ask why people are comfortable shipping one thing over another. However, it is another thing to act as though, you know, women, because it's a majority of this is women, that women are so stupid that we don't know what we're shipping. As for women of color who ship sometimes really problematic things, that we ourselves aren't also processing what our interest in those ships are. For example, myself, I have always been a big Draco Hermione fan, okay? 2 things I need to clarify about that. One, when I say Draco Malfoy, I mean Draco Malfoy in fanfiction. That's a completely different person than Draco Malfoy in them books. And part of being an adult is realizing to separate your headcanon from the real canon. That I kind of saw, this is kind of how I interpret Draco Hermione and what's into it, is that Draco and Hermione was never a ship that was asking Hermione to redeem Draco. It was a ship that was interested in Draco coming to terms with the fact that he had been raised in a racist environment, him changing, and him becoming worthy of Hermione while Hermione gets to be a bad bitch. And I think that is different than this idea that Hermione was supposed to come and save Draco, because I think a lot of times when you have a ship between one character who is broken and one character who symbolizes the good, there's this expectation that you're always trying to have the good person save the broken person. It's never like, I'm interested in this broken person fixing themselves because they want to be worthy of the person that they love. I ship Sansan. I'm not sitting here to say, like, the age difference is fine. The age difference doesn't bother me because they are not sexual at the age that Sansa is in the books. Yes, there is sexualization of her that is inappropriate, absolutely. But in the books, there is not, and that's the thing too, there is one thing about how religion is portrayed in canon versus, like, how it is portrayed in fandom. Nowhere in the text does George R. R. Martin ever imply that Sandor Clegane's sometimes toxic masculine words and attitude towards Sansa is okay. Never. There's never a point in the story where it's implied that Sansa is saving him, where Sansa is making him a better person. What I have always seen, and I think other Sansan shippers have seen, is Sandor being attracted, not to Sansa because of her youth, not because of her sexuality, but because she projects a goodness, an altruism, a kindness that does not exist in King's Landing. And Sandor, despite his appearance, despite his trauma, despite a lot of things about him that on the surface do not make him seem like a sir, that he is actually one of the most noble characters that exist within the story. That is a dynamic that is worth exploring, a dynamic that is worth, wanting to write about. And yes, some people want them to have sex, but most people who want that to happen age up Sansa. I feel like there is an erasure of the fact that fans of certain ships like this are already trying to do the work of being like, I understand this is problematic. I want to give Sansa more power, more authority, more dominance. I mean, like, the amount of times I read a fic where it's Sansa and Sandor, where Sansa gets to be fully in control of her sexuality and her presence, is so empowering. I know that I could write her as a demure, tiny little person, but that's not what I want to see. I want Sansa's inner steel to show even in sex. Even with Entrapdak, what I think is so fascinating about, because I'll be honest with you, I'm mostly read smut. I can read fiction any other day. I like to read smut, so that's mostly what I read. With Entrapdak, what I find really interesting is how a lot of the writers write Hordak to be a person who is chronically ill. And that they also, sometimes, there was one fic I read where he doesn't always have one kind of genitalia, where like sometimes he has, a phallic body part, sometimes he doesn't have phallic body parts. And Entrapta having sort of like, being kind of on the spectrum of autism, working within those things for them to have an intimate relationship. Like, so much of these ships, problematic or not, are trying to do the work of bringing the characters together in a true way, in an honest way, and also tackling the things that are complicated about it. The larger issue that comes with a lot of problematic shipping is not even the ship itself, but the fandom that, in response to like issues being brought up with their ship, will drag down other ships as a way to sort of like reclaim their dominance. Like, a lot of racism that like fans will face in terms of that, like, people who talk, like, a lot of Raylo fans will have racist things to say about Finn and Ray, and it's like, dude, like, there's no reason to like go into tags and call Finn Ray racist things, or be like, oh, because he's black, they have to be together. Like, that's not even where anyone's going through with that. So there was one shipping element in the room I wanted to kind of touch on, and that is the topic of incest. A follower of mine DM'd me because there was some incident about some young adult authors that were saying that they were into Jon and Sansa online. If you look at the Tumblr end of the year shipping thing, Jon and Sansa is a very popular ship. I don't do that, but that's them, right? And there was a lot of pushback towards these authors because I believe that there was a lot of pushback towards this because of the fact that it's an incestuous ship, and there's this idea that because they write books for young audiences, that this is perpetuating something very negative. Now, this is my opinion on the topic. Again, comment, tell me what you think. It has been a while since I've been a teenager, which is very weird to say. But I feel like, along with, the Flowers in the Attic crew that came up before us, a lot of us grew up seeing some form of incest shipping, whether it be Zeusest, which is what that was the first incest ship that I saw, was Zeusest, Zuko and Azula. Wincest from Supernatural has been popular. Inuyasha and Shishomaru, Rukia and Byakugo, my girlfriend watches My Hero Academia, Rukio and Byakuya, Itachi and Sasuke, etc. Like, most of the time, these relationships happen for one of two reasons. One is that, they have a very interesting dynamic and people want to see what it'd be like if they had sex. Like, that's really what it comes down to. It's not about, like, that they have any attraction to their actual siblings or they think incest is good. It's because of that. And the other reason that I think this happens, and I will count myself among those who feel that way, is that they wanted to read smut with a particular character. And the only character that they found interesting enough to read them having sex with was their sibling. Speaking from my own personal history, I'm not reading about Itachi and some random female OC, okay? I don't know her. And I get that that makes people deeply uncomfortable. But I think the idea that, like, talking about how you openly ship John and Sansa because of the which is really just because of the chemistry between the actors, is not normalizing the idea of incest for young people. Like, I read a lot of incest ship smut as a teen, and I don't think in real life incest is okay. I have a brother. That shit is nasty. Like, this is purely character stuff in fiction. And it's also, if you're gonna watch a show like Game of Thrones, which has 2 canonically incest couples in it that are treated as true love, teenagers are already going to be exposed to it. And I understand, and I think it's totally fine that you personally don't think it's a line that should be crossed because of child abuse reasons and you don't want it romanticized. That is totally fair. From my personal experience, from just my section of fandom, I tend to not go where I think is creepy, so I just don't go. I have always seen that kind of art and subject matter, like, very clearly labeled, very easily avoidable. Like, I have never accidentally seen a Wincest post. Like, I have never accidentally seen an incest post. Like, I do understand on paper the conflict and why I don't want to see people support it. But at the same time, as someone who was a teenager reading this stuff, and it really didn't affect me. What did affect me that I thought was really weird is on the show Elite, the Netflix show, in the 2nd season, they did have a half-sister, half-brother incest relationship. That shit was nasty though. If you are going to, in canon, here's the thing, canon versus fandom, 2 different things. You better have a good reason for that, because it was just really for shock value, and I was mad because it's the one Mexican character they got on the show. She got to have incest with her half-brother for no reason other than she bored. She's fine. She don't have to do that shit. That was just bizarre. Hi, I just wanted to clarify one important thing that I did not actually say about Flowers in the Attic. If you think that Flowers in the Attic is a romantic depiction of incest, you're reading it wrong. It is not only, like, yes, incest is a big factor in it, but really the book is about a lot of rape and generational abuse. It is not at all trying to say that this is a perfect, love story. It is deeply traumatic, and I think that the movies have not done a really good job of showing just how bleak and dark the books actually are. I think part of the reason why it has such a weird zeitgeist is because the movies definitely romanticize it a lot more than the books do. The books make it super clear that this is not a good relationship. So I just wanted to say, for the record, that Flowers in the Attic, and I would say Game of Thrones as well, they may have incest in the story, but none of these texts actually romanticize incest. There was this whole thing that was currently going on in the romance community, and I just want to make this part also clear. Talking about problematic and toxic relationships, whether they be romantic or non-romantic, in fan fiction, in fandom, is one thing. Selling and monetizing a toxic relationship, a incestuous relationship, a statutory rape relationship. I think there's a situation where there's a book about a 30-year-old coach and a 13-year-old girl. That is just wrong. So just wanted to clarify that point in case anyone was trying to say that I'm trying to say, like, oh, it's a free-for-all, we should just all do whatever. Like, you should be conscientious in what you're doing. However, as I said, when it comes to fandom, fanon, shipping, I think we should at least give people the grace to assume that they've done the work. Now back to the previously filmed content. I don't like Olicity because I think the relationship ruined Felicity's character, and I'm sorry, I didn't tune into a show about the Green Arrow to have him not be the Black Canary. You know, I can bring up that they gaslit Laurel. I don't have to bring up anything extra because the writing should think for itself. It also doesn't matter. You know, I think the most important thing that we need to do in shipping is to call out the real problem in shipping, which is A, bad writers, and 2, terrible fans. Terrible fans will ruin a ship before the ship. Like, I used to ship Steric, and then racism happened, and now I don't ship that shit no more. To me, I realize now that it's one thing to be turned off by a ship because of the racism, the sexism, the whitewashing of a bad character, which I think is totally valid if it is actually happening. But I think it's another thing to just inherently call something anything super hyperbolic that's not actually a part of the text. There's an assumption that the discussion has not already been had. You know, like, I was sitting and I was having dinner with a bunch of friends and we were talking about Phantom of the Opera and about how people will be like, did you know that, like, there's a lot of consent issues in Phantom of the Opera? And they're all just like, yeah, we're grown-ass women. Like, for me, as a Black woman, born in America, like, from descendant of slaves from the Caribbean on both sides of my family with the British, I am fully aware that Draco Malfoy is written to be a little racist dick. I, as someone who's, like, literally a descendant of 2 Commonwealths, I don't need to tell you why I like Hordak and Entrapdak by saying, like, well, he's a colonizer. Yeah, all your favorites are colonizers too, and yet here we stand. You know, like, it's never really done in, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, I don't think it's done in actual good faith to talk about colonization, to talk about racism, to talk about, you know, homophobia. It's mostly done to be like, you shouldn't like that thing. I do appreciate that Tumblr has always been a place where you can learn about these experiences, these terms, where you can really be asked to, like, explain, discuss, break down why you like what you like. I think it's good to be challenged on those things sometimes, but I think that when we're talking about things like colonization and racism, you actually have to care. Come into my DMs, into these tags, and harass people about topics that you only tertiary care about when it comes to how you prefer a couple. Like, and don't get me wrong, I see the racism out there when it comes to Raylo. I get it. Like, I'm not trying to tell, oh man, I keep stealing Julie's ticks. We get it. People of color who ship problematic things, I can assure you, we get it. Now, I'm not saying that we need to co-sign racism and sexism in these fandoms. If you see that shit, call it out. Steric shippers, yes, looking at y'all because I know what y'all be doing. Y'all love to be like the Black person who will co-sign that bullshit, but, like, they don't care about y'all. Because if they did, they wouldn't be so quick to do racist bullshit and harass Black and brown fans of Teen Wolf. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. I would love to hear what you guys think. I know I kind of dropped some, like, bombs. Let's talk about our problematic ships, guys. Turn up.